Joining me is the panel. Liberal Senator James Paterson and Bruce Hawker helped to run Labor campaigns federally and state, is now head of the Campaigns and Communications Group. Bruce, Greta Thunberg, she does seem a religious figure, doesn't she? I mean, my daughter went to Christmas carols in this beautiful church in the town she's at, and the priest said, like the Christ child, Greta Thunberg will lead us to a better world. I mean, this is getting a little serious.
Well, you know, she is a voice for youth, though, isn't she? And as much as you may and others may not like the message that she gives, Andrew, she is pointing out that the world has got some very serious issues when it comes to climate. And I don't actually think that it's a bad thing that you've got young people out there talking about this issue, because they're the ones who are going to have to deal with it in a much more confronting way than we are going to have to, people of our age, or my age anyway, not young blokes like you.
Well, that might be true. No, well, Bruce, you might like the message, but I think even a hardhead like you would be freaking out, James, about the fact that here is a 16-year-old girl being treated almost literally as a religious figure.
Yeah, it's a bit weird and it's a bit sad, Andrew, but I want to reassure any of your listeners, viewers out there who are worried that Christmas will become compulsory and celebration of Christmas will become compulsory under the new religious freedom law. That's not, in fact, the case.
Oh, well, look, listen, Mr. Freedom's
That's
speaker.
a shame.
Well, that's true. Are you going to, what would you do as a Benalla councillor? Would you paint over the wall?
It's a tough one. I mean, it's a government-owned entity and they have commissioned this work, and it sounds like it's not quite what they asked for. At the same time, I'm not really big on agents of the state going around painting over people's artwork either, so it's a tough one. I guess because it's on public property, I think they have more right to control what's
keep
there.
going, keep sitting on the fence. I've got a whole show to get. Bruce, would you paint over the mural?
No, I just put a happy hat on her head, Andrew, and you can solve the problem there and then. So,
Bruce Hawker, this is why they pay you the big bucks as a political consultant. That is brilliant. Hey, but James Paterson, the government's new tougher religious freedom bill, what exactly is tougher about it?
Well, it's got stronger protections for freedom of association, freedom of speech and freedom of religion in the bill.
I'm looking at the changes. I can't quite see many.
Well, I can go through some of them for you. So, for example, we had very strong feedback from people who run aged care homes and hospitals that they see themselves the same way that a religious school see themselves. They are there for a religious purpose and they should have effectively the same protections that we propose for schools, and they will get that. We heard from big religious charities like Vinnie's that, although yes, they do some commercial activities on the side, they're not a commercial entity substantially, so they should get protection. They'll get protection. And on the free speech angle, there was concern that the carve-out that we had to allow more speech about religious matters was not going to be broad enough and could be curtailed. And so we've been really specific about what we mean by
the definition of vilify.
And it's now going to be incitement of hatred or incitement of violence, which is, in the Australian law context, the highest possible standard.
I still can see a judge driving a Mack truck through that in incitement to hatred. They'll say, yeah. We'll see. We'll see. Bruce Hawker, a tougher religious freedom bill proposed by the government. Is this something that you'd support?
Look, I take the view, I probably wouldn't have taken it when I was young and angry, but I take the view now that religion, whether it's got any basis to it or whether it's got any basis to it or not, is a deeply enmeshed aspect of Australian society. And you basically have to recognise that religions need to be able to conduct themselves, as long as they don't do it in an oppressive way, in a way that's consistent with their religious beliefs. And I think that's reasonably easy to do if you're a mainstream religion, probably a bit harder for people to come to terms with some of the more extreme religious bodies out there. But in other words, I think it's reasonable for religious groups to be exempted from some of these anti-discrimination provisions which would otherwise apply to other parts of the community. I think it's in the nature of religious organisations that they are going to give preferential treatment, if you like, or be much more inclined to employ people who are of their own faith and not employ people who are of other faiths. And that's just a reality that we have to deal with. If it becomes a tool of oppression, if you like, by some of these organisations or some of these churches, then I think you should have a really good hard look at it. But frankly, I don't think too much turns on this.
Look, I'm hearing you, Bruce. There's a lot there. What I wonder, though, James, is why do people who have got a religion get an exemption from making decisions in good conscience about who they hire or whatever, but those of us who don't have a religion, we can't make the same, we don't have the same freedom. Now, why is that? That's not fair.
It's a reasonable point, Andrew. Like you, I'm agnostic, and I don't believe I'm any less entitled to freedoms than people who have religious beliefs. And some aspects of this bill, there are mirroring freedoms, particularly the freedom of speech provisions in the bill. They equally apply to people who want to have speech about religious matters who are not religious. So my right to critique religion is going to be better protected if this law passes. I think that's really important. But the other aspect of it is, of course, that religion does have a special place in our society for historical reasons.
Why does it morality? Why don't I say, look, I'm running a cafe and I'm only going to hire people that I think, if that was my view, strong moral values in this particular town, because I think that's important. I'm not going to hire people I think don't share my morality, even though I'm not a Christian or a Muslim or whatever.
Yeah, I think as a society we've made a very deliberate decision a number of times to go away from that path. We have a very extensive anti-discrimination framework.
I know we have.
And I'm concerned, Andrew, like you are, about the way that impinges on a freedom of association. And I think this law is a real pushback to that, restores freedom of association as well as religious liberty and free speech in a really important way.
Yeah, well,
but it doesn't overturn it completely.
Well, I'd like to go much further. But Bruce, you know very well the gentle art of rat effering. You've seen it being done by people very close to you. What is Malcolm Turnbull now up to, attacking the Morrison government again and again on global warming? Has he just got religion, or is this vengeance?
Look, I think he might have got religion, but he's got it a bit late. I mean, he had it early. He had it early back in 2008 and when he was prepared to support Kevin Rudd with his emissions trading schemes. And then, of course, religion was installed over the top of him by Tony Abbott, and he lost his religion. And then he won government back again, and he did nothing, in my view, on the issue of global warming. And the overall impression that I got was that he reinforced an impression that people had of him, that he was weak and vacillating when he really had an opportunity to do something as Prime Minister. I've got little sympathy for people who have been in the most powerful position in the country, have had an opportunity to do significant things, haven't done them, and then complain about their successor when they don't do it either. So
I don't think, well, Bruce, you're just adding to my suspicion. This is really not so much about global warming. This is about something else, isn't it, James?
Andrew, I know I'm going to disappoint you here, but I have a policy, although my disagreements with Malcolm Turnbull are fairly well known, of not critiquing former Liberal leaders publicly as much as possible.
Can you lend him your rule book to say it goes both ways?
Yeah. Well, look, I think former Liberal leaders do have a special status, and they should use it wisely. Some in the past have exercised it well, others not so well, and I would hope that Malcolm reflects on the contribution to his own legacy that he will make.
He doesn't give a rat's for that. He wants you dead.
Well, I think he should care about that, because I think there are some great achievements that occurred under his prime ministership that he can be proud of, that all Liberals should be proud of. And
I think I had a note here what those things were, but I've completely
embrace
forgotten
those
them.
much more, Andrew, if the way he conducts himself in his post-prime ministerial life,
he knows that's gone.
The dignity of the party.
He knows that's gone. He hates your guts. He wants you to lose. He wants to be the great saviour. I've never seen anything like this. I thought Kevin Rudd was bad. This is double. Bruce, Victoria's new First Peoples Assembly has met in Victoria's Parliament. This is Assembly for people identifying as Aboriginal, and their job is to negotiate a treaty with the Victorian government representing presumably non-Aboriginal people. Does this disturb you at all, especially when everyone there seemed also to have non-Aboriginal ancestry, and some quite markedly so, and just 2,000 of the 30,000 Victorians who could have voted, being identified as Aboriginal, only 2,000 of those 30,000 bothered even to vote.
Well,
why are we going through this?
Well, isn't that part of the exercise here, to try to encourage people who identify as Aborigines and have got Aboriginal history to go out and vote? The fact that such a small number of people who are Aboriginal in Victoria voted in that plebiscite or vote, whatever you want to describe it as, is indicative of the fact that they have to do more. As to the question about their mixed ancestry, I don't think, again, there's anything significant about that. I mean, there are very few people who can claim to have a pure, for want of a better word, ancestry, whether it's English, Irish, Swiss, Aboriginal, or whatever. You know, we're all mixed, and I think the real test here is whether you identify as an Aboriginal person, and I think that's the way it should be, because overwhelmingly people who do identify as Aboriginal have got very strong views about these issues, and they should be heard. And it's to the credit, I think, of the Victorian government that they are prepared to go into a negotiation for a treaty.
I prefer that bit where you said we're all mongrels, and so I agree with you. Let's all just be mongrels, called Australian mongrels, and leave it at that. Does that disturb you at all? I mean, some of those people look like, well, Bruce Pascoe could have been one of them.
I'm very wary about this modern trend, Andrew, to emphasise difference rather than what we have in common. I think that's a dangerous path for a society to go down. I think it risks dividing us on the basis of race. And I know Noel Pearson would object to that and say it's not race, it's about indigeneity, but really that's a distinction without a difference. It's an inherited trait based on our ancestry, and we're going to treat people differently on an inherited trait. And I don't care whether you call that race or indigeneity or heritage or ethnicity. All of it is dividing Australians when we actually have lots to celebrate.
It's a new form of apartheid.
But
I thought apartheid was bad. Hang on. I'm sorry, Bruce. We'll have to hold on to that thought. I'm going to bring you back first show of next year to continue that. Thank you so much for joining us, Bruce Hawker and James Paterson. You had a great year. Coming up next, Chris